The diamond on her finger was less a promise than a prison sentence. Jasmine Monroe could feel its cold weight every second of the day, a constant reminder that her life was no longer her own. Her future had been traded for her father's security, sold to the richest and cruelest man in the territory, Beaufort Kane. He saw her as his most beautiful acquisition. But across the dusty expanse, another man saw something else. He saw the fire she tried to hide the spirit, straining against its gilded cage. He was a Lakota warrior, a man of wind and earth, and he would challenge her fate with a single earth-shattering word. A word that would ignite a war between two worlds, all for the heart of a woman they thought they could control. The dust of Redemption Creek settled on everything, on the sills of the too large house her father had built on the velvet of the parlor furniture, and on the suffocating stillness of Jasmine Monroe's future. It was a fine reddish dust, the kind that spoke of land that was both bountiful and brutal, a place that could make a man rich or break him in a single season. Her father, a merchant named Thomas Monroe, was currently teetering on the edge of the latter. That was where Beaufort Kane came in. Kane wasn't just rich. He owned the very concept of wealth in their corner of the territory. His ranches stretched from the Whisperwind Canyons to the Serpent River, his cattle bearing a brand that was as good as a royal seal. He was a man built of hard angles and cold confidence, with eyes the color of a winter sky that missed nothing and forgave less. And he had decided he wanted Jasmine. The proposal hadn't been a question, but a statement of fact. Her father, his face pale with the shame of his debts, to Kane had presented it to her as their only salvation. "He'll forgive what I owe," Thomas had whispered, not meeting her eyes. "He'll set us right, Jassy. He'll take care of you." Jasmine knew what being taken care of by Beau Kane meant. She saw it in the way he looked at his prized stallion, with a mixture of pride and absolute ownership. She felt it in the way his hand would rest on the small of her back, a gesture that looked courteous to onlookers but felt like a brand. He was purchasing a wife, a beautiful hostess, to adorn his sprawling mansion and solidify his dynasty. He spoke of their future children as he would a new line of cattle stock. Every day felt like a slow march toward oblivion. Her afternoons were spent with Beau's dour sister, Prudence, who instructed her on the proper management of a large estate, the correct way to address visiting dignitaries, and the precise degree of polite disinterest to show the servants. A lady of your future station must be a fortress of decorum. Prudence would say, her voice as crisp as a starched collar. Beaufort detests emotional displays. Jasmine's emotional displays were happening deep inside, a silent, raging storm. She would look out her window at the distant hazy outline of the Black Hills Mountains that seemed to breathe a freedom she could only dream of. The townspeople whispered about the Lakota who lived there, calling them savages and ghosts of the prairie. But to Jasmine, those hills represented everything. Redemption Creek was not wild, untamed, and true. It was on a sweltering Tuesday, while walking through the town market with Prudence, that she first saw him. The Lakota often came to town to trade their presence, a quiet, unnerving counterpoint to the boisterous commerce of the settlers. They moved with a silent grace that made the stomping, loud-talking townsman seem clumsy and oafish. He stood near the blacksmith's forge, trading a brace of impeccably cured beaver pelts for a set of steel knives. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his black hair long and tied back with a simple leather cord. Unlike the others who averted their gazes or stared with open hostility, his eyes were calm and observant. They swept over the chaotic market scene with an unnerving stillness, a deep intelligence that seemed to take in everything at once. Then those eyes found hers. It was for no more than a second, Prudence was droning on about the poor quality of the baker's flour, and Jasmine's attention had drifted. For that one heartbeat, the world fell away. She saw no savage, no outsider. She saw a man whose eyes held the same vast, untamed wilderness as the hills he came from. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a profound, startling recognition, as if he were looking past the prim dress and the carefully pinned hair, and seeing the prisoner rattling the bars of her cage. Her breath caught in her throat. A flush of heat entirely different from the afternoon sun prickled her skin. She broke the gaze first, her heart hammering against her ribs, her head bowed in a sudden, inexplicable fit of shame and fear. "Jasmine, are you listening?" Prudence's sharp voice cut through the haze. "Pay attention. The wife of Beaufort Kane cannot afford to be a daydreamer." Jasmine nodded numbly, her hands clutching her basket so tightly her knuckles went white. She chanced another glance toward the blacksmith's, but he was gone, vanished as silently as he had appeared. Yet the ghost of his gaze remained a single spark in the suffocating dust of her life. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. It was a terrifying, exhilarating flicker of something she couldn't name, a feeling that whispered of a world far beyond the reach of Beaufort Kane. The annual Founders' Day picnic was the pinnacle of Redemption Creek's social calendar, and for Beaufort Kane, it was the perfect stage. He intended to formally announce his engagement to Jasmine, to parade his beautiful, well-bred fiancée before the entire territory. The event was held in a grassy meadow just outside of town, where the relentless sun was tempered by the shade of a few lonely cottonwoods. The air was thick with the scent of roasted pig and the sound of strained pleasantries. Jasmine felt like a doll on display. She wore a dress of pale blue silk that Beau had ordered from St. Louis, its delicate fabric, a stark contrast to the rugged landscape. Beau's hand was a constant heavy presence on her arm, or the small of her back, guiding her from one group of fawning townspeople to another. "This is my Jasmine," he would say, his voice booming with proprietary pride. "Isn't she a picture?" She would smile, murmur the correct greetings, and die a little more inside with each introduction. She watched him interact with the other men, the mayor, the sheriff, the lesser ranchers. He was a king holding court, dispensing favors and veiled threats with equal ease. She saw him sneer at a farmer whose crop had failed, and then laugh heartily with the banker who held the man's mortgage. He was a man who enjoyed power, not for what it could build, but for how it could control. A small group of Lakota had set up a trading post at the far edge of the meadow, a customary but tense arrangement for Founders' Day. They offered intricate beadwork and sturdy furs, their faces stoic and unreadable amidst the forced cheer of the settlers. Most of the townsfolk gave them a wide berth, whispering amongst themselves. Jasmine's gaze drifted towards them, searching for a face she couldn't forget. And then she saw him. Coda. He stood apart from the others, watching his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't trading today. He was simply observing. His presence was a quiet challenge to the entire affair. Their eyes met again, this time for longer. There was no mistaking the intensity. It felt as if a silent conversation were passing between them across the crowded field, a question, an acknowledgement, a warning. Beau, noticing her distraction, followed her gaze. His lip curled in disdain. "Filthy savages," he muttered, his grip on her arm, tightening painfully. "The army should have cleared them out years ago. Don't you look at them?" His words were like a slap. Jasmine flinched, pulling her arm away. "They're just trading, Beaufort. They're beggars and thieves, and they have no place here. Remember your station." His voice was low and menacing, a chilling promise of the authority he would wield over her once they were married. The moment of confrontation arrived, as it always did with Bo, with public cruelty. A young boy no older than 10 tripped near Bo's feet, spilling a glass of lemonade on his polished boots. Before the boy's mortified mother could even rush forward, Bo grabbed the child by the collar, lifting him half off his feet. "Watch where you're going, you little whelp!" He snarled, his face contorted with fury. The boy began to cry, his small body trembling. "Beaufort, he's just a child," Jasmine pleaded, reaching for his arm. He shoved her hand away. "He needs to learn respect for his betters." The entire picnic had fallen silent. Everyone was watching their faces, a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. This was Beaufort Kane in his element. And then a shadow fell over them. Coda had moved from the edge of the meadow to stand directly behind Bo. He hadn't made a sound, but his presence was as loud as a thunderclap. He was taller than Bo, his stillness a stark contrast to the rancher's simmering rage. "Let the boy go," Coda said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence with absolute authority. Bo turned slowly, his eyes narrowing with disbelief and contempt. "And who are you to give me orders?" "He is a child, Coda." Repeated his gaze, unwavering. "You are a man. Act like one." The insult was profound. Bo's face turned a blotchy red. He released the boy, who scrambled back to his mother and took a menacing step toward Coda. "You've got a lot of nerve, Indian. You and your kind are tolerated here, not welcome. Now get back to your corner before I have the sheriff run you out of the county." Coda didn't even glance at the sweating, indecisive sheriff. His eyes moved from Bo to Jasmine, who stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. He saw the faint bruise already forming on her arm where Bo had gripped her. He saw the terror in her eyes, but beneath it he saw the same trapped fire he'd seen in the market. Bo noticed the look. He laughed a harsh, ugly sound. He reached out, grabbing Jasmine's wrist and yanking her to his side. He held her there like a shield, a possession. "This is what you're looking at," Bo taunted, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you can look at what belongs to me? She is my property. She is my future wife. Everyone here knows it." He looked around at the silent crowd, demanding their complicity. Then he turned back to Coda, a triumphant sneer on his face. "She belongs to me." Coda's gaze remained fixed on Jasmine. The world seemed to shrink until it was only the three of them in the silent meadow. He took one deliberate step forward, planting his feet firmly in the grass. He looked past Bo directly into Jasmine's soul and spoke a single definitive word that would forever alter the course of her life. "Mine." The word hung in the air, sharp and heavy as a guillotine's blade. For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of the wind in the cottonwoods. The entire town of Redemption Creek stood as if frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Then the world exploded. Beaufort Kane's face cycled through shock, confusion, and finally a deep, volcanic rage. He let go of Jasmine with a shove, his entire focus narrowing on the Lakota warrior who had dared to publicly humiliate him. "What did you say?" he roared, spittle flying from his lips. Coda didn't flinch. His expression remained unreadable, his stance rooted to the earth. He simply held Bo's gaze, letting the silence serve as his answer. That was all it took. With a bellow of fury, Bo launched himself at Coda, his fists flailing like a street brawler. It was clumsy, an attack born of pure ego. Coda moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost slow. He sidestepped the first punch, deflected the second with an open palm, and as Bo stumbled forward from his own momentum, Coda simply put a hand on his chest and pushed. It was not a violent shove, but it was perfectly timed and leveraged. Bo staggered backward, tripping over his own feet, and landed in an undignified heap in the dust, his fine suit ruined. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Before Bo could scramble to his feet, Sheriff Miller, a man whose spine was made of jelly, finally found his voice. "Now hold on, that's enough of that," he blustered, drawing his pistol with a trembling hand and pointing it vaguely in Coda's direction. Jasmine's father, Thomas Monroe, rushed forward and grabbed her arm, his face ashen with terror. "Jasmine, we're leaving." Now he pulled her away from the center of the chaos, his grip like a vice. "But father," she started to protest, her mind reeling. Not another word, he hissed, dragging her toward their carriage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I didn't do anything," she cried, but her voice was lost in the growing uproar. Bo was on his feet now, his face a mask of murderous fury. "You're a dead man," he shrieked at Coda, pointing a trembling finger. "I'll see you hang for this. I'll see your whole filthy tribe burned to the ground." Coda said nothing. He gave one last lingering look at Jasmine as she was forced into the carriage. It was a look that conveyed everything, a promise, a question, a regret. Then, with the same silent dignity he had shown all day, he turned and walked back toward the edge of the meadow, disappearing among his people. He didn't run. He simply departed, leaving the chaos of Redemption Creek to fester in his wake. The ride home was a blur of recriminations. Her father paced the parlor like a caged animal, his hands running through his thinning hair. "Ruined, we're ruined," he lamented. "Cain will destroy me. He'll destroy us all. He was hurting a child." "Father," and he grabbed me. Jasmine argued her own fear, warring with a strange, fierce pride in what Coda had done. And that savage claiming "woo like a stray dog" was the solution, Thomas roared. "He's put a target on your back, on all our backs." "Cain's pride is everything. He will not let this stand." He was right. By sundown, the news had spread through town like a prairie fire. Jasmine was locked in her room, a prisoner in her own home. From her window, she could see groups of men gathering on the street, Bo's ranch hands, among them their faces grim and their rifles held ready. They were forming a posse. The story had already twisted and warped into a lurid tale of a savage brute attempting to steal a helpless white woman. The hours that followed were the longest of her life. She was torn between two terrifying possibilities. The first was a life with Bo Kane, which now promised not just suffocation, but vengeful cruelty. He would never forgive this humiliation, and he would take it out on her every single day of their marriage. The second possibility was the unknown world represented by Coda. He had defended her, claimed her in a way that was both terrifying and thrillingly defiant. He had seen her, truly seen her. But what did that mean? Was he just as possessive as Bo? Only from a different world, sleep was impossible. The house was silent, but the town was not. She could hear the distant sounds of angry shouts and the clatter of horses' hooves. Bo was hunting him. The thought sent a chill of dread down her spine. Coda was alone, and Bo had an army. Late into the night, as the moon cast long shadows across her floor, she heard a soft, scratching sound at her window pane. Her heart leapt into her throat. She crept to the window, her body trembling, and peered out. There in the shadows of the large oak tree in their garden stood Coda. He had evaded the posse, circling back to the very heart of the town to her. He was looking up at her, his face calm in the moonlight. He had taken an impossible risk to come back. He was here for an answer to the question his claim had posed. And Jasmine knew, with a certainty that frightened her more than anything else, that her life was about to be irrevocably changed. Her first instinct was to shrink back from the window, to pretend she hadn't seen him. Her father's warnings, Prudence's lectures, Bo's venomous rage, they all screamed at her that this man was danger incarnate. But the memory of his quiet strength, of the way he had looked at her, as if she were a person and not a possession, held her rooted to the spot. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she carefully unlatched the window and pushed it open. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of dust and distant pines. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're looking for you. Bo has a posse." Coda didn't seem surprised. He remained in the deep shadows of the oak, his form blending with the darkness. "I know." His voice was a low rumble, as steady as the earth beneath his feet. "They look in the hills. They do not look in the heart of their own town. They think I am a wild animal. They do not think I can be clever." There was a quiet confidence in his words that both unsettled and reassured her. He stepped forward slightly, just enough for the moonlight to catch the planes of his face. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp and alive with intelligence. "You are in more danger than I am," he said, his gaze intense. Jasmine clutched the windowsill. "Bo!" "He's furious. My father has locked me in. He says I've ruined everything." "You have ruined nothing," Coda stated, not as a comfort, but as a fact. "A cage is a cage, whether its bars are iron or gold. What I saw today was not a man protecting his future wife. It was a man guarding his property. He does not see the fire inside you. He only wants to own the lamp." His words struck a chord so deep within her that it made her ache. He had articulated the very thing she had felt, but could never put into words. He saw her. Why she whispered the question, encompassing everything. "Why did you do it? Why did you say that word?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching hers across the distance. "In my culture," he began slowly, "some things are not for barter or for sale. A person's spirit is their own. When a man sees a spirit that matches his, that calls to his, he must speak for it. To let it be crushed is to crush a part of himself. I saw you. I saw your spirit trying to break free. So I spoke for it." He paused. I spoke for myself too. The raw honesty of his confession left her breathless. This wasn't about ownership, in the way Bo understood it. This was something else entirely, something ancient and profound that she couldn't fully comprehend. "What you said, it has made me an outcast," she said, testing him. "The whole town thinks I'm complicit, that I invited this. Do you care what they think?" He asked the question, sharp and direct. "They are the people who watched you be sold. They are the people who stood by while that man terrorized a child. Their good opinion is not a prize worth having." She had no answer for that, because he was right. Their approval was a currency she no longer valued, a terrifying, liberating thought. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. Coda took another step closer, standing directly below her window now. "I want nothing from you. I offer something to you. A choice. The life you have is a lie. It is a slow death. The man who claims you will smother the fire he cannot understand. The people around you will watch it happen. I offer a different path. It is not an easy one. It is hard and it is dangerous. But it is a life. A real one." He wasn't making grand promises of love or happiness. He was offering her the one thing no one else ever had a choice, the freedom to be the author of her own story, even if that story was difficult and fraught with peril. She looked around her room at the fine furniture and the silk dress draped over a chair. They were beautiful things, but they were the trappings of her cage. Then she looked down at Coda, a man with nothing but the clothes on his back and the conviction in his eyes. He represented the vast, terrifying, beautiful unknown. The fear was immense. It was a physical thing, a cold knot in her stomach. Leaving meant abandoning everything she had ever known: her home, her father, the fragile security of her world. It meant running into a wilderness with a man she barely knew, a man her people considered a savage. But the alternative was Beaufort Kane. It was a lifetime of looking in the mirror and not recognizing the hollowed-out woman staring back. It was the slow, agonizing death of her soul. "If I come with you," she said, her voice shaking but resolute, "he will not stop. Beau will hunt us to the ends of the earth." Let him, Coda said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "He will find that the earth is my home, not his." He extended a hand toward her. It was not a command, but an invitation. All she had to do was take it. The choice was hers. The world held its breath as Jasmine Monroe stood at the precipice of her own life, deciding whether to fall back into the safety of her prison or to leap into the terrifying freedom of the wild. The decision once made settled in her soul with the weight of destiny. Jasmine looked at Coda's outstretched hand, then back at the suffocating silence of her room. The fear was still there, a wild bird beating its wings against her ribs, but for the first time it was overshadowed by something stronger resolve. "Wait," she whispered, pulling back from the window. Panic flickered in her chest. What could she possibly take? Her fine dresses were useless. Her jewelry was a reminder of her bondage. Her eyes landed on a small, worn, leather-bound book on her nightstand, a collection of poems from her mother, the only thing of true value she owned. She tucked it into the pocket of her simple nightdress. Next, she pulled on a pair of sturdy riding boots she kept for the rare occasions her father allowed her a supervised ride. Finally, she grabbed a thick wool shawl from her wardrobe. It wasn't much, but it was a start. When she returned to the window, Coda was still there, his patience as profound as the night sky. He hadn't moved a muscle. Seeing the shawl and boots, a flicker of understanding, perhaps even approval, crossed his face. "The trellis," he said, pointing to the thick vines of ivy that snaked up the side of the house. "It is strong." Her heart hammered. It was a 20-foot drop. Clenching her jaw, she threw one leg over the sill. The rough bark of the ivy scratched at her hands, and the thin fabric of her nightdress snagged on the thorns, but she barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on Coda's upturned face, a fixed point in the dizzying darkness. He didn't coach or command her. He simply watched his presence, a silent vote of confidence. Her feet finally touched the soft earth of the garden, and she stumbled, her legs weak with adrenaline. Coda's hands were there, instantly steadying her. His touch was firm and warm, not possessive like Beau's, but supportive. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing in the scent of pine and leather that clung to him, feeling the solid strength of his presence. "We must go," he murmured, his voice close to her ear. "The horses are hidden by the creek." He led her through the sleeping town, moving through back alleys and shadowed gardens, with the silent expertise of a ghost. Jasmine, who had lived her entire life within these streets, felt like a stranger in her own home. Every dog's bark, every creak of a distant floorboard sent a jolt of terror through her. But Coda moved with an unshakable calm, his hand never leaving her arm, guiding her through the darkness. 2 horses were tethered in a thicket of willows by the creek bank. They were lean, muscular animals, nothing like the pampered mares in her father's stable. Coda helped her mount one, swinging himself onto the other with effortless grace. "Hold on tight," he said. "We will ride hard until dawn." And they did. They plunged into the vast, open country beyond the town limits, the landscape illuminated by a sliver of moon. The wilderness that had always seemed a distant abstract concept from her window was now a living, breathing entity all around her. The air grew cooler, the sounds of civilization faded, replaced by the cry of a lone coyote and the rhythmic drumming of their horses' hooves. For Jassy it was a brutal awakening. The saddle leather chafed her raw muscles. She never knew she had screamed in protest, and the cold night air bit at her exposed skin. But with the pain came a thrilling, undeniable sense of liberation. With every mile they put between themselves and Redemption Creek, she felt the suffocating weight of Beau's diamond ring and her father's expectations fall away. She was no longer Jasmine Monroe, the prospective wife of Beaufort Kane. She was just Jassy, a woman riding into the unknown under a canopy of stars. Coda set a relentless pace, but he was always aware of her. He would glance back, his silhouette dark against the horizon, ensuring she was still with him. During a brief stop to let the horses drink from a stream, he handed her a leather water skin and a piece of dried jerky. It was tough and salty, nothing like the delicate food she was used to, but it was the most satisfying meal she had ever eaten. "Are they following us?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Not yet," he said, scanning the dark horizon behind them. "But they will. Kane will not give up easily. His pride is a beast with a long memory." As dawn began to break, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and grey, they reached the foothills of the Black Hills. The terrain grew rougher, the air sharper. Coda finally brought them to a halt in a small hidden canyon where a spring trickled from the rocks. Jassy practically fell from her horse, her body a single throbbing ache. She collapsed onto a patch of soft grass, utterly exhausted, but profoundly alive. Coda tended to the horses first, his movements economical and precise. Then he came to her and knelt down. He examined her hands, which were scratched and bleeding from the trellis. Without a word, he took a small pouch from his belt, mixed some herbs with water from the spring to make a poultice, and gently applied it to her cuts. His touch was surprisingly tender. "You are stronger than you think," he said, looking her in the eyes. Tears welled in her own bourne, not of sadness, but of a raw, overwhelming mix of fear, relief and gratitude. "I don't even know your name," she realized, her voice thick with emotion. A faint smile touched his lips. "I am Coda. I'm Jasmine. But you can call me Jassy." "Jassy," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. He nodded slowly. "It is a good name. Now rest. The journey ahead is long, and Beaufort Kane is just beginning to understand what he has lost." The journey into the heart of the Pahasapa, the Black Hills, was both an ordeal and a revelation for Jassy. The land was a beautiful, formidable teacher. Coda taught her how to read the signs of the earth, how to find water, which plants were safe to eat, and how to move through the wilderness without leaving a trace. He showed her how the bark of an aspen could be used to treat a fever, and how the flight pattern of a hawk could signal the presence of game. Each day, she shed a layer of the helpless town girl she had been replaced by a growing resilience she never knew she possessed. Her admiration for Coda deepened with every passing hour. He was a part of this land, as natural and essential as the rock and the pines. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. He told her stories of his people, of the spirits that lived in the mountains and the streams, and of the sacred bond they held with the earth. It was a worldview so different from the greedy, possessive ethos of Redemption Creek that it felt like learning to breathe a new kind of air. The connection between them grew in the quiet moments, a shared glance across a campfire, the way he would adjust her shawl when she shivered at the simple trust of sleeping in shifts to keep watch. After nearly a week of travel, they arrived at his village. It was nestled in a hidden valley, a collection of tipis arranged in a wide circle around a central fire pit. The sight filled Jassy with both awe and trepidation. This was it. This was the world she had chosen. Her arrival caused an immediate stir. The Lakota people emerged from their homes, their faces a mixture of intense curiosity and deep-seated suspicion. A white woman dressed in ragged borrowed buckskin coda had given her arriving with one of their most respected warriors. It was an unprecedented event. Children stared with wide, dark eyes, while the elders watched her with unreadable expressions. Coda led her to the center of the village, where an older man with a face like a weathered map and eyes full of wisdom stood waiting. This was Chief Sitting Bull's cousin, Charging Hawk, the leader of their small band. Coda spoke to him in the fluid melodic Lakota tongue, his voice calm and respectful, but firm. Jassy stood beside him, feeling utterly exposed, the focus of every eye in the village. She couldn't understand the words, but she could feel the tension. She saw glances thrown her way, some hostile, some questioning. Finally, Charging Hawk turned his penetrating gaze on her. He spoke in broken but clear English. "The path you walk is a dangerous one, white woman. You bring the shadow of the man you fled with you." I know, Jassy said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I did not ask for Coda to bring me here to cause trouble for his people. I came because I had no other choice for a life of freedom." The chief considered her words, his eyes searching her face for any sign of deceit. "Freedom is a heavy blanket," he said cryptically. "Sometimes it warms and sometimes it smothers. You must prove you are worthy of it here." The weeks that followed were a trial by fire. She was an outsider, and she was treated as such. While Coda was her staunchest defender, he knew she had to earn her own place. She was given tasks traditionally performed by women, scraping hides, gathering roots, tending the fires. Her soft hands became calloused and strong. She learned to be patient, to listen more than she spoke, and to observe the subtle rhythms of village life. An older woman named Wana, whose name meant spring flower, took a reluctant pity on her. Wana's own daughter had been lost to the sickness brought by the white settlers, and her heart was hard, but she saw something in Jassy, a sincerity and a willingness to learn. She taught Jassy how to bead, how to cook over an open fire, and a few essential words of their language. Slowly, painstakingly, Jassy began to build bridges. She played with the children who were the first to accept her, and she listened to the stories of the elders, showing respect for their traditions. She was finding not just a refuge, but a home. She was discovering a sense of community she had never felt in the polite but hollow society of Redemption Creek. But the shadow Charging Hawk had spoken of was lengthening. One evening a scout returned to the village, his horse lathered and his face grim. He reported a large group of white men, heavily armed, making their way deep into the hills. They were led by a man who matched Beaufort Kane's description, and with them were two ruthless trackers known for their ability to hunt men. A chill went through the village. Beau hadn't given up. His wounded pride had festered into an obsession. He wasn't just coming for Jassy, he was coming for vengeance. He was using Jassy's kidnapping as a pretext to lead a punitive expedition, an excuse to wipe out the savages who had defied him. A council was held that night. The mood was grim. Some argued they should give Jassy back, that her life was not worth the risk to the entire village. A young, hot-headed warrior named Chaitan spoke loudly. "She is not one of us. Why should we die for a white woman who has brought the hornet's nest to our door?" Coda stood before the council, fire his face stoic. "She is here under my protection. I claimed her, and I will defend her. But she is more than that now. She has a strong heart. She has respected our ways. She is one of us in spirit. To give her to a man like Cain is to feed one of our own to a wolf. It is not our way." Then, to everyone's surprise, Jassy stepped forward into the firelight, her heart pounding. "You should not have to die for me," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is my fight, but I will not go back to that man. I would rather die here, a free woman, than live as his slave. If you will let me, I will fight with you. This is my home now, and I will help defend it." A stunned silence fell over the council. A white woman offering to fight alongside them against her own people. Charging Hawk stared at her, and for the first time a look of profound respect entered his eyes. He nodded slowly. "The wolf is at the door," the old chief declared, his voice ringing with authority. "We will not feed it. We will meet its teeth with our own." The decision was made. They would not run. They would make their stand in the valley that was their home, and Jassy, the girl from Redemption Creek, would stand with them. The valley, once a sanctuary of peaceful life, transformed into a fortress of silent, disciplined resolve. The air grew taut, humming with an energy that was both grim and courageous. This was not the chaotic, whiskey-fueled bravado Jassy had witnessed among the men in Redemption Creek. This was the solemn preparation of a people defending the sacred ground of their ancestors. Every movement had a purpose. Warriors methodically checked their bowstrings and fletched new arrows, their faces carved from stone. The women, their expressions a mixture of fierce determination and deep worry, worked to secure the village, moving the children and the most vulnerable elders to the safety of hidden caves high in the canyon walls. Jassy, her heart a drum, beating a rhythm of fear and resolve, refused to be sheltered. She was no longer a guest or a refugee. This was her home now, and its fate was her own. She worked alongside Wanna, her hands, once soft and accustomed to embroidery, now capably grinding herbs for poultices and sharpening blades. Her greatest contribution, however, came from a place of painful familiarity, her knowledge of Beaufort Cain. In the final hours before dawn, she stood with Coda and Charging Hawk before a fire, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick. "He is a man of immense pride," she explained, her voice low and certain. "He will not see this as a battle of equals. He sees it as an extermination. He will not use stealth or cleverness, because to do so would be to admit you are a worthy opponent. He will ride straight through the main pass." She looked at Coda, her eyes conveying the certainty of her conviction. "He will want to make a show of his power to ride in and overwhelm you with brute force. He believes it is his right." Coda listened, his gaze never leaving her face. He saw not a frightened girl, but a strategist, a partner. He and the other warriors absorbed her insight, refining their plans. They would not meet Beau's force with force, but with the wisdom of the land itself. Rockfalls were prepared, ambush points were chosen in the high crags, and warriors melted into the landscape they knew, as well as their own skin. As the first pale light of dawn bled over the horizon, Jassy took her position on a concealed ledge overlooking the pass. Below her, the valley was still and silent, a sleeping giant. But she knew that in the rocks and trees, dozens of eyes were watching, waiting. Her role was critical. With a set of polished stones, she would act as a lookout, flashing signals to the warriors hidden on the opposite ridge, relaying the numbers and movements of Beau's men in a simple code they had devised. The attack began not with a war cry, but with the arrogant thunder of hooves, a sound of brute conquest. Beau Cain rode at the head of his posse, a small army of nearly 40 men. Through a small spyglass Coda had given her, Jassy could see his face, flushed with confidence and a lust for vengeance. He was a conqueror, returning to claim his stolen property. As the posse flooded into the narrow pass, The valley itself seemed to spring to life. The first volley of arrows was a whisper of death from the high ridges. Horses screamed and reared their riders, toppling into the dust in confusion. The confident charge dissolved into a panicked bottleneck. Bo's enraged roars echoed off the canyon walls as he tried to rally his men, but they were being attacked by ghosts they couldn't see. From her vantage point, Jassy felt a terrifying, almost out-of-body detachment. She saw puffs of rifle smoke from below, heard the sickening thud of bullets striking rock near her position. Her fear was a living thing, but she forced it down her hands, moving with practiced speed as she flashed her signals. 10 men breaking to the right, a group dismounting near the riverbed. Their leader is exposed. She was a vital part of the valley's immune system, identifying the infection and directing the antibodies. The battle raged, a chaotic symphony of rifle cracks, Lakota war cries, and the screams of wounded men. Bo's forces were larger and better armed, but the Lakota were fighting for everything they had. They moved with the lethal grace of predators in their natural element, striking and then vanishing back into the rocks. Then through the swirling dust and smoke, it happened. Bo, in a moment of frustration, scanned the canyon walls, searching for the source of the resistance. His eyes, burning with a mad fury, swept past Jassy's position, then snapped back. For a heartbeat, their gazes locked across the distance. A horrifying smile of recognition and triumph spread across his face. There he bellowed his voice, carrying clearly in a lull in the fighting. He pointed directly at her. "The witch. It's her. Get her." His obsession, the true purpose of this entire invasion, was laid bare. Abandoning any pretense of leading his men, Bo and a handful of his most loyal gunmen broke away from the main skirmish. They began a desperate, reckless scramble up the rocky path leading to her ledge. Jassy's blood ran cold. The ledge that had been her vantage point was now a trap. Coda, engaged in a fierce fight near the river, saw Bo's charge. A sharp, guttural cry was ripped from his throat. He moved instantly, a blur of motion, as he disengaged and began to scale the sheer rock face, taking the most direct but most dangerous route to intercept them. But Jassy knew he wouldn't be fast enough. She was alone. The men were closing in their faces, contorted with effort and malice. The girl from Redemption Creek would have screamed. She would have cowered. But Jassy was not that girl anymore. Her fear sharpened into a blade of pure focus. She would not be a damsel in distress. She would not be a prize to be recaptured. She scanned her small space, her eyes landing on a heavy flat-sided rock about the size of a loaf of bread. As Bo, gasping for air, clawed his way onto the ledge, he found her waiting. He raised his rifle, the barrel wavering slightly from his exertion. "It's over, Jasmine," he spat, his voice a venomous rasp. "Your little adventure is done. You're coming home with me, and I swear I will teach you a lesson you will never forget for this humiliation." "My name," she said, her voice ringing with a clarity and power that stunned him into a momentary pause, "is Jassy, and I am already home." He lunged for her, his face a mask of ownership. In that instant, she moved not with the grace of a warrior, but with the desperate strength of a survivor. She swung the heavy rock with both hands, a single decisive arc of motion. It didn't connect with him, but with the stock of his rifle. The crack of splintering wood echoed in the small space, and the weapon flew from his grasp, clattering over the side of the cliff. He stared at his empty hands, his mind unable to process her defiance. That split second of shock was all Coda needed. He vaulted onto the ledge, landing silently between Jassy and Bo. He was no longer the calm, observant man she knew. He was a primal force, his eyes blazing with a protective fury that was terrifying to behold. The fight was not a fight at all. It was an execution of skill. Koda moved with a fluid, unstoppable power, deflecting Bo's clumsy punches and using the man's own momentum against him. Within seconds, Bo was disarmed of his sidearm and pinned helpless with his back to the sheer drop. Bo stared into Koda's merciless eyes, then down at the dizzying fall below. His arrogance, finally shattered, replaced by pure abject terror. "Savage," he choked out the insult, now a pathetic plea. Koda looked from Bo's pathetic trembling form to Jassie's face, which was bruised and scratched, but resolute and unafraid. He saw her strength, her survival. Killing this man would be an anticlimax. The true victory had already been won. Bo's power, his reputation, his very identity had been broken here, on this ledge, not just by a Lakota warrior, but by the woman he had tried to own. "Your fight is over," Koda said, his voice flat and devoid of passion. He released his grip, shoving Bo away from the edge. The rancher stumbled and collapsed in a heap, a broken man, weeping with shame and relief. Below, the battle had ceased. The remaining posse, seeing their leader defeated and captured, lost all will to fight. They threw down their rifles, surrendering to the victorious Lakota. As the sun began to set, casting long, peaceful shadows across the valley, Jassie and Koda stood together on the ledge. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and blood, but also with the profound silence of survival. Later, Charging Hawk approached them, his weathered face showing no triumph, only a deep, abiding respect, as his gaze fell upon Jassie. "You defended the Pahasapa," he said, his voice resonating with authority. "You have the heart of a Lakota. You have earned your place among us." Jassie looked at Koda, her heart overflowing with a love that felt as ancient and solid as the hills around them. He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. Their pasts were ashes, their future an untrodden path. They had come from two worlds that were meant to be at war. But here on this blood-soaked ground, they had forged a new one together. It was a world claimed by a single word and defended with everything they had. In the end, Jasmine and Koda's story wasn't just about love. It was a testament to the fact that destiny isn't written in ledgers or marriage contracts. It's carved into the soul by the choices we dare to make. They proved that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to build a new world in the face of it, to defend the home you choose and the family you create. Their legacy echoed through the canyons, a quiet, powerful reminder that a life of true freedom is always worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most profound declaration of love is a single word, mine. What do you think? Was Jassie right to leave everything behind for a dangerous, unknown future? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If their incredible story of defiance and love moved you, please honor their memory by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing for more tales of history's hidden heroes. Thank you for watching.